Your soulmate only has 3 days left, open it now to save them. The police arrived. My beloved child. 3 days. That was all the message said your soulmate had left before something they had been quietly fighting could no longer be ignored. But the most frightening part wasn't the countdown. It was what happened moments after the message appeared. Someone knocked hard on the door. Once. Twice. Then came a voice nobody expected to hear, "Police. We need to speak with you." Your soulmate froze. They had been holding a sealed envelope they weren't supposed to open until tomorrow, and suddenly that envelope felt heavier than anything in the room. Their hands trembled as they placed it on the table. They hadn't committed a crime. They weren't being arrested. Yet somehow, the officers knew about the same 3-day deadline. And before your soulmate could ask how, one officer said something that changed the meaning of everything. "We believe someone has been trying to reach the person connected to you. That person was you." Your soulmate didn't answer immediately. Their eyes moved toward the envelope because your name, or something unmistakably connected to you, was written inside. For days, they had been receiving strange warnings telling them to make an important decision before the 3rd day ended. At first, they dismissed them as a misunderstanding. Then another message arrived containing a detail nobody outside their closest circle should have known. That was when fear turned into questions. Who knew so much? Why was your soulmate being given exactly 3 days? And why had the police suddenly become involved? Don't skip, because what happened next made the situation even stranger. One officer placed a photograph on the table. Your soulmate stared at it, then slowly covered their mouth. The photograph wasn't frightening because of what it showed. It was frightening because of where it had been taken, and because your soulmate recognized something in the background that connected directly to a private conversation about you. The officer asked your soulmate one simple question: when was the last time you spoke honestly about this person? Your soulmate's expression changed. Suddenly, this wasn't only about mysterious messages or a countdown. It was about something they had been hiding emotionally for far too long. They admitted that they had been preparing to tell you something important, but fear kept stopping them. The 3-day warning seemed to be forcing a decision they had avoided for months. Yet the police weren't there because of that confession. They had discovered another piece of information. Something suggesting the countdown wasn't about physical danger at all, but about a time-sensitive situation that could permanently change your soulmate's future and their chance to reach you. Then the officer finally allowed them to open the sealed envelope. Your soulmate broke the seal, unfolded the paper, and went completely silent. There were only 2 lines inside. The first mentioned you. But when they read the second line, they looked directly at the officer and whispered, "How could anyone possibly know that?" For several seconds, your soulmate couldn't move, because that second line contained a detail they had never written down, never posted online, and never shared with anyone except one trusted person. It described the exact moment they had decided they could no longer keep pretending their feelings for you were temporary. Even the officer noticed the color leave their face. "Who did you tell?" he asked. Your soulmate hesitated, then quietly gave a name. That changed everything. The officers exchanged a look and revealed that the same person had contacted them earlier that evening, worried that your soulmate was about to make a life-changing decision under pressure. But there was another problem. That person claimed they hadn't written the envelope. So who had? Your soulmate looked back at the first line. The one mentioning you, and suddenly noticed 3 tiny numbers written beneath your name. They weren't random. They appeared to represent a date, and that date was exactly 3 days away. The officers asked whether anything important was supposed to happen on that date. Your soulmate immediately said no, but their voice didn't sound certain. Then a memory surfaced. Weeks earlier, they had received an opportunity that could take them far away and change their life completely. There was a deadline attached to it, but they had kept the entire situation secret because accepting it might mean closing the door on something they still desperately wanted with you. Suddenly the phrase, 3 days left, made terrifying emotional sense. This wasn't necessarily a warning that something terrible would happen to them. It could be a warning that after 3 days, a choice would become irreversible. Stay till the end, because the police still hadn't explained the photograph. When your soulmate finally asked about it, the officer turned the picture over. On the back was a handwritten sentence: "Before they leave, make sure they know the truth about the person they've been waiting for." Your soulmate's heart began pounding. "What truth?" they asked. The officer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he explained that the photograph had been found with several documents belonging to someone who had recently tried to contact your soulmate. Nothing suggested a crime, but the unusual circumstances had raised enough concern for the situation to be checked. And hidden among those documents was something your soulmate never expected to see: a copy of an old message connected to you. Your soulmate recognized the words instantly. They had believed that message never reached them. For months, they thought your silence meant you had moved on, forgotten them, or chosen a different future. But now there was evidence suggesting something had interrupted the truth before it ever reached either of you. The officer carefully placed one final folded page beside the photograph. Your soulmate opened it, read the first sentence, and their eyes filled with emotion. Because someone had finally explained what happened to that missing message, and the name written at the bottom belonged to the last person your soulmate ever expected. The name at the bottom made your soulmate read the page twice. It belonged to someone they trusted completely, someone who had repeatedly told them that waiting for you was pointless. According to the letter, this person had seen the missing message before your soulmate ever knew it existed. They hadn't destroyed it, but they had delayed it, believing they were protecting your soulmate from disappointment. That single decision created months of confusion. Your soulmate had interpreted your absence one way, while you may have been living with an entirely different understanding. The officer reminded them that there was still no evidence of a crime, but emotionally, the discovery hit harder than anything your soulmate expected. Then they noticed a sentence near the bottom: "If you're reading this, there are only 3 days before the decision becomes final." Suddenly, the countdown had a clear destination, but one enormous question remained. What decision was about to become impossible to reverse? Your soulmate finally admitted the truth. In 3 days, they were expected to sign documents connected to that opportunity they had kept secret. Once signed, their plans would change dramatically, and they believed whatever possibility remained between you would disappear with them. They had convinced themselves that leaving was easier than discovering you no longer cared. But now the missing message changed everything. The police arrival hadn't come to frighten them, it had interrupted them at the exact moment they were preparing to stop looking backward. "So this person knew about the deadline?" your soulmate asked. The officer nodded, then pointed toward the photograph again. Something huge was waiting for them. A small section in the corner showed a place your soulmate immediately recognized, the location where they had once imagined meeting you again. And according to the timestamp, the photograph had been taken recently. Your soulmate stepped closer, staring at that tiny detail until another realization surfaced. Someone had been trying to bring two pieces of the story together before those 3 days disappeared. The officer then handed over the final document recovered with the photograph. It wasn't another warning. It was a short explanation from the person who had delayed the original message, admitting that guilt had finally become impossible to carry. They wanted your soulmate to know the truth before making a permanent choice based on a misunderstanding. But one sentence changed your soulmate's expression completely. "There is something else about the message that I never told you." Your soulmate looked up sharply. The officer said nothing. They unfolded the remaining section of the page and discovered that the missing message had contained more than feelings. There had been a specific request meant only for your soulmate, a request connected to the very place shown in that photograph. And when your soulmate finally read what you had supposedly asked them to do, they whispered, "Then I still have time." But the officer's next words immediately changed that hope. "Maybe, but there's something you need to know before you go there." The officer lowered his voice and told your soulmate that the place in the photograph was no longer just an old memory. Someone had been there earlier that day asking questions about them, and whoever it was had left before the officers arrived. Your soulmate immediately wanted to know whether it had been you, but there was no confirmation. Only one clue remained, a handwritten note left at the location containing the same 3 numbers from the envelope. The officer explained that nothing suggested immediate danger, yet the timing was impossible to ignore. Your soulmate had 3 days before signing those life-changing documents. Someone had deliberately uncovered the missing message, and now an unknown person was trying to lead them back to the one place connected to you. Then your soulmate noticed something the officer hadn't mentioned. Beneath those 3 numbers was a single word written in familiar handwriting: tomorrow. That word changed their entire plan. Your soulmate had intended to wait until morning, think carefully, and decide whether reopening the past was worth the emotional risk. Now waiting felt like another mistake. They grabbed their phone and searched through months of conversations, looking for anything they had overlooked. Buried beneath ordinary messages was one strange notification from weeks earlier, a message request that had never been opened. Their breathing slowed as they tapped it. There was no long explanation. No dramatic confession. Just a photograph of the same location and one sentence: "If they still believe you stopped caring, tell them what really happened." Your soulmate showed the screen to the officer. He studied it carefully, then asked when it had arrived. The date made everyone in the room go quiet. It had been sent before your soulmate ever received the 3-day warning. That meant the countdown hadn't started the mystery. Someone had been trying to correct the misunderstanding long before the deadline appeared. Your soulmate suddenly understood that every clue was pushing toward one decision: discover the truth before signing away the future they might still want with you. But just as they prepared to leave, the officer received a call. His expression changed while he listened. He asked one question, waited, then looked directly at your soulmate. "They found something at the location," he said. Your soulmate's hand tightened around the phone. The officer explained that another sealed envelope had been discovered there only minutes earlier, placed somewhere it couldn't have been sitting unnoticed for long. And unlike the first envelope, this one wasn't addressed to your soulmate. Your name was written across the front. But underneath it were 5 words that made your soulmate stop at the doorway: "Only they can open this." Your soulmate stared at those 5 words and immediately understood the problem. The envelope was meant for you, not them. Opening it would cross a line they weren't willing to cross, no matter how desperately they wanted answers. The officer agreed. Instead, he carefully photographed the outside and pointed out something nearly invisible beside your name, a small mark matching the symbol on the original missing message. Your soulmate recognized it instantly. That symbol had once been part of a private promise between the two of you, something so specific that very few people could have understood its meaning. Suddenly, the possibility that you were somehow connected to these recent clues became harder to dismiss. But there was one detail that didn't fit. The handwriting on the envelope wasn't yours. Whoever placed it there knew the story between you, yet they were still hiding their identity. Then the officer received another update. A witness near the location remembered seeing someone place something down and leave quickly. There was no dramatic chase, no threatening behavior, just a person who apparently wanted the envelope to be discovered without being seen. Your soulmate asked for a description, and the answer made their expression change. It sounded remarkably similar to the trusted person who had admitted delaying your original message. That meant this entire chain of clues might have been an attempt to repair the damage they had caused. But why involve the police? Why create a countdown instead of simply telling the truth? Don't skip, because your soulmate finally asked that exact question. The officer explained that the person had initially contacted authorities out of concern after realizing how emotionally serious the misunderstanding had become. They hadn't expected officers to arrive that night. The police were checking the circumstances, not delivering the countdown themselves. For the first time, your soulmate could separate the facts from the fear. Nobody had told them they had 3 days left to live. The 3 days referred to the deadline for the decision that could take them away. The mysterious person wasn't trying to harm them. They appeared to be desperately correcting an old mistake before time ran out. But that realization created an even bigger question. What was inside the envelope addressed to you? Your soulmate looked at the officer and said there had to be a way to get it into your hands before the deadline. Before he could respond, your soulmate's phone vibrated. A new message appeared from an unknown number. It contained only 9 words: "Don't bring the envelope to them. Bring them here." Beneath the sentence was a time for the following evening. And when your soulmate saw who had apparently sent the message, they whispered, "That can't be possible." The sender's name belonged to the very person your soulmate believed had disappeared from this story months ago, the person who first knew that your message had been delayed. Your soulmate immediately called the number, but it went straight to voicemail. Then a second message arrived: "I owe both of you the truth, but I need to explain it face to face." Suddenly the strange trail began forming a clearer picture. The envelopes, the photograph, the countdown, even the unexpected police visit were all connected to one person's attempt to repair a mistake before your soulmate made that irreversible decision. But your soulmate wasn't relieved. They were angry. Months of uncertainty had shaped everything they believed about you. And now, with less than 3 days remaining, someone was asking them to trust another secret meeting. The officer advised them not to make assumptions and reminded them that nothing they had found proved you knew any of this was happening. That detail struck your soulmate hardest. What if you were completely unaware? What if you had spent all this time believing they received your message and deliberately ignored it? Your soulmate looked again at the sealed envelope carrying your name. They couldn't open it, but suddenly they understood why getting it to you mattered. Inside might be the explanation that had been missing from both sides. Then another notification appeared. This time it wasn't from the mysterious number. It came through an old contact your soulmate hadn't heard from in months. The message contained a screenshot of the original communication you had supposedly sent, and one portion had been highlighted. Your soulmate leaned closer. There was a sentence they had never seen before: "If you still want this too, meet me where we made that promise." The same place shown in every photograph. Your soulmate's eyes filled with emotion, because now the location wasn't simply symbolic. You had apparently asked them to meet you there long ago, and they had never known. The silence that followed had been built on a message that never arrived properly. But the screenshot contained one more detail, and this one changed the timeline completely. There was a second timestamp showing that someone had attempted to forward your message again much later. Only days before your soulmate accepted the opportunity that could take them away. Someone had tried to fix the mistake once already, and that attempt had failed too. Your soulmate turned toward the officer, ready to ask how 2 separate attempts could disappear. Before they spoke, the phone rang. Unknown number. They answered. A trembling voice said, "Please don't sign anything tomorrow. There's one final thing you don't know about the message." Then the caller revealed what had been removed from the original, and your soulmate went completely silent. The caller spoke slowly, almost as if they were afraid your soulmate would hang up before hearing everything. What had been removed wasn't another romantic sentence. It was a date and a simple request for an answer. You had apparently given your soulmate a chance to respond before making an important decision of your own, but because that section never reached them, they never knew there was anything to answer. Your soulmate closed their eyes as the truth settled in. Both of you may have mistaken silence for rejection. Both of you may have made choices based on something neither of you actually intended. Why would anyone remove that? Your soulmate demanded. The caller admitted that fear had driven the decision. They believed keeping the two of you apart would prevent disappointment. Instead, it created the very heartbreak they claimed they wanted to prevent. But then the caller added, "There's a reason I'm telling you tonight. The 3 days aren't the only deadline anymore." Your soulmate looked toward the officer. "What other deadline?" The caller explained that the envelope addressed to you contained proof of what had happened. The complete message history, the missing section, and a written confession taking responsibility for delaying it. But the person who prepared everything was planning to leave the next morning and wanted the truth delivered before disappearing from your lives completely. Your soulmate's anger shifted into urgency. They didn't care about revenge. They didn't want another confrontation. They wanted the misunderstanding to end. The officer reminded them that the safest and simplest path was also the most honest one: stop following mysterious clues and communicate directly. That sentence hit your soulmate harder than expected. For months, they had waited for signs, explanations, and certainty. Now there was finally one thing they could control. They could choose whether to reach for you before the remaining time vanished. Your soulmate picked up their phone and opened your contact. Their thumb hovered over your name. One message could change everything, but after months of silence, even the first word felt enormous. They typed, deleted it, then tried again. Finally, they wrote something simple: "There is something about your old message I only learned tonight. I think we need to talk." Before they could send it, however, the officer's phone rang again. He listened carefully, then asked your soulmate to wait. Someone had arrived at the location from the photograph and was asking specifically about the sealed envelope addressed to you. The officer asked for the person's name. A few seconds later, he slowly lowered the phone. Your soulmate saw his expression and whispered, "Who is it?" He looked directly at them and answered, "It's the person who says they were supposed to deliver your message months ago, and they claim the story you've been told tonight is still missing one crucial piece." That final claim stopped your soulmate from pressing send. The person waiting at the location wasn't denying that your message had been delayed. They were saying everyone had misunderstood why. According to them, the original message had passed through more than one set of hands, and the person who confessed earlier had taken responsibility for only part of what happened. Your soulmate felt their frustration rising. Every answer seemed to uncover another hidden layer. But this time, the officer had something concrete. He had been told that the person at the location carried the original copy, not a screenshot, not a forwarded version, but the complete message exactly as it had first appeared. And there was one line on that copy that hadn't appeared in anything your soulmate had seen tonight. One line that could explain why someone became convinced that keeping the message away from them was somehow the right choice. When that missing line was read over the phone, your soulmate's expression softened. You had written that you didn't want them to answer because they felt pressured, lonely, or afraid of losing you. You wanted them to come only if their feelings were real and their decision was completely their own. Someone had interpreted those words as uncertainty. Your soulmate heard something entirely different: respect. You hadn't been demanding a promise. You had been giving them freedom to choose. Suddenly, months of resentment began collapsing under the weight of one misunderstood sentence. Stay till the end, because there was still one question nobody could answer. If the original message had finally been recovered, why was there now an envelope addressed specifically to you? Your soulmate asked the officer to find out. The answer came quickly: that envelope contained something written by your soulmate themselves, but they had no memory of writing it. Then the explanation arrived, and it reached even further into the past. Months ago, during the confusion, your soulmate had written you a letter they never intended to send. They had given it to the trusted person who knew about the situation, then changed their mind and asked for it back. They were told it had been discarded. It hadn't been. That unsent letter had survived all this time, and now someone had sealed it inside the envelope with your name across the front. Your soulmate remembered every emotion they had poured into those pages, the disappointment, the questions, and one confession they had never been brave enough to say directly to you. Their eyes moved toward the countdown on the documents waiting to be signed. 3 days suddenly felt incredibly short. But before they could decide whether that old letter should ever reach you, their phone vibrated again. This time the screen showed something completely different from every mysterious message before it. It showed your name, and you were calling. Your soulmate stared at your name flashing across the screen, almost afraid that answering would make everything suddenly real. The officer quietly stepped away, giving them space. On the 4th ring, your soulmate finally answered. For one breathless second, neither of you spoke. Then your voice came through, uncertain but unmistakably emotional. I just received a message saying you finally know. Your soulmate's heart dropped. They hadn't contacted you yet, which meant someone else had. You explained that an unknown number had sent you a photograph of the sealed envelope and told you not to ignore what happened months ago. Your soulmate wanted to explain everything at once, the missing message, the recovered letter, the 3-day deadline, but you interrupted with one question: did you really think I stopped caring? And suddenly every mystery became secondary to the answer they had been afraid to give you. Your soulmate admitted that they had believed exactly that. When your message never reached them, silence became its own explanation. They thought you had chosen to walk away, so they began forcing themselves toward a different future. Then they told you about the opportunity and the documents waiting to be signed. I have 3 days, they said quietly. You went silent. Not because you were angry, but because you finally understood what the countdown meant. It wasn't predicting something terrible. It was measuring the remaining time before your soulmate made a decision based on incomplete information. Then you revealed something they didn't expect. You still remembered the meeting place. In fact, you had gone there once after sending the original message, hoping they might appear even without replying. They never came. Your soulmate closed their eyes. 2 people had waited for each other at different moments, both believing the other had chosen absence. But you still didn't know about the envelope containing your soulmate's unsent letter. When they finally told you, your voice changed. Don't read it to me, you said. If it was meant for me, let me receive it the way you wrote it. Your soulmate agreed, and for the first time that night, the confusion began giving way to something calmer. A chance to face the truth without another person interpreting it. Then you asked where the envelope was. Before your soulmate could answer, the officer returned with an update. The person holding it had agreed to leave it with the authorities so it could be transferred appropriately. But they had also left one final statement for both of you. Your soulmate put the call on speaker. The officer unfolded the statement and began reading. The first sentence was an apology. The second explained the missing messages. But the third revealed why the truth had suddenly been exposed now, after months of silence, and when you and your soulmate heard the reason, neither of you said a word. The reason was painfully simple. The person responsible had discovered your soulmate was preparing to leave. Until then, they had convinced themselves the old misunderstanding should remain buried. They believed reopening it would only cause more pain. But when they learned about the 3-day deadline, they realized their silence was about to influence a permanent decision. The statement admitted that nobody had the right to choose your future for either of you. Your soulmate listened without interrupting, while you remained quietly on the call. Then came another confession. The mysterious warnings hadn't been intended to frighten anyone. 3 days left referred only to the signing deadline, but the wording had created panic that was never intended. That panic was also what eventually brought concerned people, and then the police, into the situation. Now the mystery had changed completely. The question wasn't who created the countdown anymore. It was what your soulmate would do with the truth before it reached zero. Your soulmate finally spoke to you without hiding behind uncertainty. They admitted they had nearly signed the documents that morning. They had almost chosen the new opportunity because leaving seemed easier than continuing to wonder whether you cared. You answered with something they had waited months to hear: "I never wanted you to stay because of me. I only wanted you to know how I felt before you decided." Those words mirrored the missing line from your original message almost perfectly. Your soulmate realized the choice had never truly been between you and their future. The real choice was whether they would make that future decision honestly instead of letting a misunderstanding make it for them. The officer placed the recovered envelope on the table, still sealed, still carrying your name. Your soulmate looked at it and said, "You need to read this before I decide anything." But then you surprised them. You didn't ask them to bring it immediately. You asked one question first: "Do you still mean what you wrote inside?" Your soulmate knew exactly which confession you meant, even though you had never read the letter. Their voice became quiet. "I don't know who I was when I wrote every word," they admitted, "but I know what I feel now." Before they could explain further, the officer noticed another sheet tucked behind the recovered statement. It hadn't been mentioned in the inventory. He unfolded it carefully and found a short handwritten note dated months earlier, the same day your original message had disappeared. At the top were your soulmate's initials. Beneath them was a sentence proving that someone had attempted to return the message almost immediately after withholding it. But the final line was even more important. It identified exactly where that second attempt had gone. And suddenly your soulmate realized there might be another person who had known the truth from the very beginning. Your soulmate read the final line again, and the name connected to that second attempt immediately brought back an uncomfortable memory. Months earlier, someone close to them had casually asked what they would do if you ever returned with an explanation. At the time, your soulmate thought it was an innocent question. Now it sounded completely different. That person had apparently received the forwarded copy of your message after the first delivery failed. They had known there was more to your silence, yet they never mentioned it. Your soulmate felt betrayed, but the officer urged them not to assume intent before hearing the explanation. Then your voice came through the speaker: "I know that name." Your soulmate went still. You explained that the same person had contacted you once too, asking whether you were serious about your feelings. You answered honestly, and then never heard from them again. That revelation connected the two sides for the first time. Someone hadn't merely seen the message, they had spoken separately with both of you. Your soulmate asked what you had told them, and your answer made the room silent. You had said you cared deeply, but you refused to interfere with your soulmate's future. If they wanted another life, you would respect it. Somewhere along the way, those words had been interpreted as permission to let the connection disappear. Your soulmate finally understood how easily cautious words had become false conclusions. One person thought they were protecting you. Another thought they were protecting your soulmate. Meanwhile, neither of you had been given the chance to speak directly. But there was still something strange about the 3-day deadline. The officer checked the documents again and noticed the deadline wasn't exactly 3 days away anymore. Because midnight was approaching, there were actually less than 49 hours remaining. Your soulmate looked at the clock, then at the unsigned documents. Suddenly the countdown felt real in a completely different way. Not dangerous. Not threatening. Just irreversible. They told you they didn't want another intermediary, another hidden letter, or another misunderstood sentence deciding what happened next. You agreed. The two of you needed one honest conversation before any papers were signed. But before you could choose when and where, your soulmate received a final text from the person named in that handwritten note. I know you discovered what happened. I should have told you months ago. Before you meet them, please give me 10 minutes to explain why I stayed silent. Your soulmate stared at the screen, torn between anger and curiosity. Then another message appeared beneath it, this one containing a photograph neither you nor your soulmate had ever seen. And in the center of that photograph was something that could completely change who everyone believed had made the first mistake. The photograph had been taken on the day your original message was supposed to reach your soulmate. In the background was the familiar meeting place, but the important detail was closer to the camera, a phone screen showing your message already opened, with a reply being typed beneath it. Your soulmate zoomed in until the unfinished words became readable. I received this. Please tell them I need a little time. That changed the timeline instantly. Someone hadn't simply hidden your message before your soulmate knew it existed. A response had apparently been started on their behalf, or at least from a device connected to someone around them. Your soulmate insisted they had never written those words. Then you remembered something equally strange. Hours after sending your message, you had received a notification suggesting it had been seen. You assumed your soulmate had opened it and chosen not to answer. For months, that tiny notification had shaped what you believed. The officer examined the photograph and cautioned both of you against jumping to conclusions. A picture could show what happened, but not necessarily why. Then the person asking for 10 minutes finally called. Your soulmate answered with you still listening. Their explanation came quickly. They admitted opening the forwarded message because they had been asked to help decide how urgently it needed to reach your soulmate. When they saw how emotional it was, they panicked. They began typing a temporary response, intending to buy time, but deleted it before sending anything. At least, that's what they believed. What they didn't realize was that the message had already been marked as seen. That single digital trace made you believe your soulmate had read everything. I thought I was preventing pressure, the person said. I didn't understand I was creating silence. Your soulmate didn't forgive them immediately. But finally, the mystery had a believable beginning. Then your soulmate asked the question that mattered most. Why didn't you tell either of us once you realized what happened? The voice on the phone became quiet. They admitted that by the time they understood the consequences, both of you had already pulled away. Fear and embarrassment made them delay the truth, and every passing week made confession harder. Only when they learned your soulmate was days away from signing the documents did they finally cooperate in revealing everything. But before ending the call, they shared one final detail. The photograph wasn't the only record from that day. There was also a short voice message your soulmate had recorded hours later without knowing your original message existed. It had never reached you. The recording had now been recovered, and according to the person holding it, your soulmate had said your name in the first few seconds, followed by words that could change everything you believed about why they disappeared. Your soulmate didn't remember recording that voice message until the first few seconds played through the phone. Then their expression changed. Their own voice, quieter and more vulnerable than they remembered, filled the room. If they ever ask why I disappeared, tell them I was afraid I'd ask them to stay. Your soulmate immediately covered their mouth. That recording had been made before they knew about your original message, which meant their feelings had already been real long before tonight's revelations. They hadn't pulled away because they stopped caring. They pulled away because caring had begun influencing every decision they made. The recording continued, revealing that an opportunity had already been forming months earlier. Your soulmate feared that telling you would force an impossible conversation before either of you was ready. So while you interpreted their silence as rejection, they were quietly trying to protect you from a choice they believed belonged to them alone. Then came the sentence nobody expected. If I leave, the old recording continued, I need them to know I didn't choose another person over them. I chose the only future I thought was available. You went completely silent on the call. Suddenly, the recovered letter and missing messages weren't the strongest evidence anymore. Your soulmate's own forgotten words proved that the misunderstanding had been running in both directions from the beginning. You had waited because you cared. They had withdrawn because they cared. And other people, trying to manage what they didn't understand, had turned two cautious decisions into months of distance. Your soulmate finally asked you, if you had heard this then, what would you have done? Your answer came without hesitation, would have asked you to talk to me before deciding anything. Those words landed heavily, because with less than 49 hours remaining, that was exactly the chance you had now. Your soulmate looked down at the unsigned documents and made their first clear decision of the night. They wouldn't sign anything until the two of you spoke face to face. Not because you were asking them to abandon their opportunity. You weren't. But neither of you wanted another permanent choice built on assumptions. The officer confirmed there was nothing requiring either of you to remain involved with the investigation, the immediate concern had been resolved, and what remained was personal. Then your soulmate asked you whether you would meet at the place from the photograph the following day. You agreed. For the first time, the countdown no longer felt like something chasing them. It felt like time they could still use. But seconds before the call ended, you said, "There's something I need to bring with me too." Your soulmate asked what it was. You hesitated, then answered, "The message I wrote after I thought you rejected me." And when you explained what that second message contained, your soulmate realized tomorrow's meeting might reveal a secret even bigger than the one uncovered tonight. Your soulmate barely slept after hearing about that second message. They kept wondering what you could have written after believing they had deliberately ignored you. The following day, they arrived early at the familiar meeting place, carrying the sealed envelope addressed to you and the unsigned documents that had started the 3-day countdown. When you finally appeared, neither of you rushed to speak. Months of unanswered questions stood between you. Then your soulmate handed you the envelope. You opened it carefully and found the letter they had written during the worst part of the misunderstanding. The first lines were painful, but one sentence stopped you completely. I wish I knew whether losing you was something you chose, or something that simply happened to us. You looked up, and your soulmate